Let's testify tonight. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord. But you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, Lord. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing it. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And good morning. And so, working on trying to get things going for doing these in the morning. I'm sorry, I meant to do one on Monday, and that's on me. I overslept, and now I'm a mess because I forgot to finish doing my hair this morning. But I'll just have to deal with it. All right, so not getting off to the best early morning start here. So today we're going to be doing Leviticus chapter 23. So we are cruising along through Leviticus. And then, we'll be heading, let's see, how many chapters are in Leviticus? Yeah, there's only 27 chapters in Leviticus. So we'll be done with Leviticus in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be on to Numbers. The most exciting book of the Bible, the book based on mathematics. Not really, but yeah. So anyway, I appreciate the grace that you guys have offered me these last couple of weeks. Between my wife's anniversary and just other random personal things that I've been trying to deal with, haven't been able to get many of the live streams in. But now that we are in the new year properly, I hope. Oh, yeah, I just realized. I'm sorry. Let me turn that off. Thank you, Gorilla. I had the heater on for a little bit, but while I was getting things set up to keep the little girl warm. But anyway, it was now that we're in the new year proper is where I was. Hopefully we'll be able to get into a fairly regular routine, at least for the next few months. At the very least through the 40-day fast, which of course starts next week. So very much looking forward to that. And so if you're planning on participating in the 40-day fast, no, that's funny because you're talking about the noise at your work. Well, but I had the heater on behind me, so I'm sure that was making some noise for some of you. So for the 40-day fast, we're going to be covering the entirety of the book of Revelation over the course of 40 days in a series of shorts on this very channel. Starting next Monday, there will be a short released every single day, doing a small portion of Revelation as well as a commentary written by the Experience Community Church, not by myself. And so this will not be my opinion. The views and opinions expressed during this series will not be of mine, but of the Experience Community Church. Although, for the most part, I agree with the Experience Community Church. So if there's something that I disagree with, I'm not going to raise it in that video series. Maybe I'll talk about it in like the closest live stream to it. But yeah, that's the plan. Anyway, so looking forward to the Revelation series, looking forward to getting into the book of Numbers. And just it's and then I think that this year we should make it through the entirety of the Torah because I mean we just have Numbers and Deuteronomy really, and so then we hopefully before the end of the year we'll be getting into at least the major prophets. So I'm looking very much forward to that. And you'll see as time goes on, it's kind of interesting as we explore, because we're going through the entirety of the Old Testament. And so far, I think that a lot of you would agree that the Old Testament is not nearly as brutal and evil and harsh and mean and all that as a lot of people make it out to be. People that will take selected verses out of context and try to make it seem far worse than it truly is. And especially when you take into account various contexts, which is extraordinarily important when you're dealing with literature. I know that some people think that context is a convenient excuse for certain things, but the truth is that, I hate to quote Star Trek Discovery, but context is for kings, right? That's the name of an episode. But the context is extraordinarily important when dealing with literature, particularly ancient literature, because we are talking about something that was written thousands of years ago. And it's not necessarily the people in their innate nature were all that different 5,000 years ago than they are today. And that's kind of one of the very interesting things is as we go through some of these things, especially when you get into the life and times of King David, we'll see that people made the same stupid, boneheaded mistakes back then that they make today. And I don't think people have changed that much. But the language is very different, the ancient Hebrew language compared to modern English. And so sometimes we have to pause and understand what certain words mean. So when we talked about this a little bit in Genesis, when God describes himself as hating Esau but loving Jacob. And a lot of people take that to mean that God, just as the text says, hated Esau and loved Jacob. The problem there was not the that is that the word used for hate is not meaning what you're thinking when you hear the word hate. Instead, and the interesting thing is, if you look at the context of the Bible, it defines it in Scripture directly. What the word actually means is that one was loved more than the other. So, if we were writing that same passage today, you might say that God said that he loved Jacob more than Esau. And really, if we then put it into the proper vernacular of today, you would say that God gave Jacob preferential treatment over Esau. That God chose Jacob to be the one to carry on the line of Abraham, not Esau. And so we get very confused when we read some of these terms. We tend to think that whatever the English translation of the Bible is the way that it was originally written. And of course, the English language, with all of its bizarreness, didn't exist 5,000 years ago. And so we need to be very, very careful about that kind of thing. So besides Gorilla, we got Robert has joined us. Shalom, shalom, Robert. And Josiah is here saying hello and says, in the Orthodox Church, icon are windows to heaven. That makes no sense to me, but okay, I will take your word for it. Josiah, I had a really fun conversation as an Uber driver the other day with a Egyptian Orthodox or Coptic Christian, and we had a really good talk. And my apologies to those of you that are Orthodox, that you may think that I just hate all Orthodox Christians. I don't. I obviously had a big problem with the way that Alex Bogey presented his faith, although he hasn't been around in forever. And the Orthodox Church overall is I think that the people that attend the Orthodox Church, for the most part, just as good as any other brand of Christian. But I have some problems with the Orthodox doctrines, if you will. But I could say the same about a lot of other churches. So, just the Orthodox Church tends to come up a lot. For some reason, we get a lot of Orthodox around here. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the appointed festivals. And I think that this highlights an interesting problem in modern Judaism, which we'll get to after we read this, time permitting. Also, just so you know, so for these morning live streams, I do have a hard cutoff time of just before 9 a.m. my time, so about an hour from now. The reason for that is mainly because at that time I have to pack up and take my son to his workout that he does, and we leave the house every morning at 9. So I need a couple of minutes to get ready for that. Obviously, I'm going to have to finish doing my hair. Anyway, but let's get right on over there. And so here we are in Leviticus chapter 23. We're going to talk about the appointed festivals of God as God handed down to the Jews some 5,000 years ago. So the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, there are many, these are my appointed festivals, the appointed festivals of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies," or what we would, by the modern vernacular, what we would call holidays, right? So these, remember, people get confused about Jewish holidays. Well, here they are. The Sabbath. Well, this is one that most people already know about, but it's also kind of interesting. Remember, by Jewish tradition, the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, Saturday, is a holy day, or holiday is the modern term. And so when we talk about Jewish holidays, every Saturday is a Jewish holiday. If you are a genuine practicing Jew, it should be, unlike Christians, it would actually be against your religious beliefs to work on Saturday. Now, does that mean like you should take it to the extreme that many Jews do? I don't think so. I don't get that feeling from. I mean, the Sabbath is a day of rest, a day that you are called to not have to work, and basically, it's that you work 6 days and you're off for one. The funny thing is, how many people work 6 days a week nowadays? Not very many. Anyway, so there are 6 days when you may work, but the seventh day is the day of the Sabbath. Rest, a day of sacred assembly. You are not to do any work wherever you live. It is a Sabbath to the Lord. So notice, it doesn't say you can't do anything at all. It says that you can't do any work, or you shouldn't do any work. And the idea here, and remember, Jesus, when he talks about the Sabbath, he'll say, "Hey, you know what? If you got a sheep that wanders off on the Sabbath, you're still going to go get the sheep, right?" I mean, it's not like you're literally going to do nothing no matter what. And I said, "Well, I guess that sheep's dead." It's just, your kid is hanging from on a cliff and about to die. You're not going to say, "Well, son, I'd love to help you and prevent you from falling into that pit and dying, but it's Sabbath, so what can I do?" That's kind of I think that's taking things too far, even and violating the spirit of this law. And to call it a law is even kind of a stretch. The Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at their appointed times. The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. Now, keep in mind, that does not mean January 14th, right? You're thinking of the Gregorian calendars, the one that we use in most of the Western world. This would be the 14th day of the first month on the Jewish calendar. So I don't know when Jewish New Year is, but on the 14th day of their equivalent to January, that would be when Passover is. On So it begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. On the 15th day of that month, the Lord's festival of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days, you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. For 7 days, present a food offering to the Lord, and on the seventh day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. And so, that's Passover in a nutshell. Big deal for the Jews. Offering the first fruits. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, whenever you enter on the land I'm going to give to you and reap the harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain of your harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must sacrifice as a burnt offering to the Lord a lamb of a year old without defect, together with its grain, offering a 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil, a food offering presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and there's a drink offering of a quarter of a hin of wine. Now, some of these measurements obviously we don't use anymore, but you get the general idea. You must not eat any bread or roast any new roasted or new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for generations to come, wherever you live. Now, look, I'm not an expert on modern Jewish culture. I don't think they're doing this, and at least most Jews, and certainly not Reform Jews. But so I understand that people kind of make excuses for this, but it seems pretty cut and dry that God says, look, I don't care where you are, I don't care what you're doing, this is something you're going to do for all time. And today the Jews are like, yeah, well, he didn't really mean it. That's not smart thinking, in my opinion. All right, the Festival of Weeks. For the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, count off 7 full weeks, count off 50 days, up to the day after the Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. So notice the time variable. So this you have the Sabbath on the 14th day of the first month, and then you count off a specific time from that to get to this one. Anyway, so from wherever you live, bring 2 loaves made with 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour, baked with yeast, as a wave offering the first fruits to the Lord. Present with this bread 7 male lambs, each a year old and without defect, 1 young bull, and 2 rams, and they will be a burnt offering to the Lord, together with the grain offerings and drink offerings. A food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Then sacrifice 1 male goat for a sin offering, and 2 lambs, each a year old, for the fellowship offering. The priest is to wave the 2 lambs before the Lord as a wave offering, together with the bread of the first fruits. They are a sacred offering to the Lord for the priest. On that same day, you are to proclaim a sacred assembly and do no regular work. This will be a lasting ordinance for generations to come, wherever you live. Notice he's repeating this idea that it doesn't matter where you are in the world; it doesn't. You are still going to do this. And this is why, and we see in Jesus's time, the Jews would all go to Jerusalem to do their sacrifices every year. I'm not doing that anymore. Haven't done that in a couple of thousand years. So this is a real problem, I think, if you are a practicing Jew. And I understand that there are Jewish rabbis that have written great dissertations on the idea that you can't do sacrifices without a temple and blah, blah, blah. But to me, it's basically just making excuses for bad behavior rather than trying to correct the bad behavior. I think it seems pretty obvious that God intended for the Jews to continue their sacrificial system for all time, and they just kind of said, yeah, screw it, we don't need to do that anymore. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. Now, it's a repeat of an earlier command, but it's another thing to remember. Charity is a commandment, right? And it's something that unfortunately we all kind of ignore, not just Jews, but Gentiles as well. But is that nowadays we just figure the government will take care of them. That's not charity. Being forced to the government forcibly taking your money and giving it to someone else to help them, while it can be a necessary thing, and you can have debates about whether or not those types of programs are necessary. It is not charity. Charity is you willingly giving to people in need, and something that unfortunately is just not culturally significant anymore. We tend to think of charity as a negative thing. We'll say, oh wow, he just wants charity, like that's a bad thing, right? But if someone is struggling, charity should be something that we freely offer, not something that we consider ourselves superior to them because we are in a better place than they are. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the first day of the seventh month, you are to have a day of Sabbath rest, a sacred assembly commemorated with trumpet blasts. Do no regular work, but present a food offering to the Lord. So notice a lot of these have a Sabbath day involved in addition to your weekly Sabbath that you do on Saturdays. And then the Day of Atonement. The Lord said to Moses, on the 10th day of the seventh month is the Day of Atonement. So on the first day of the seventh month, you have a Sabbath day in which you celebrate the beginning of the month with trumpet blast. And then 10 days later, you have the Day of Atonement. Hold a sacred assembly and deny yourselves. This is a command to fast, right? And present a food offering to the Lord. Do not do any work on that day because it's the Day of Atonement. When the atonement is made for you before the Lord your God, those who do not deny themselves on that day must be cut off from their people. I will destroy from among their people anyone who does any work on that day. You shall do no work at all. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live. It is a day of Sabbath rest to you, and a day you must deny yourselves from the evening to the ninth day of the month until the following evening. You are to observe your Sabbath. Now, here's the funny thing about this. And I don't remember which one of these is which as far as name. Like, we have names for these things that we go by today, like Purim and stuff like that. But I don't remember which one the Day of Atonement is, or if it's just called the Day of Atonement. But I have a problem with Jewish culture today in that they take some of these Sabbaths and stuff very seriously. So you talk to a Jew about, hey, I need you to do something, and it happens to fall on that day, they're going to be like, sorry, can't do it. Absolutely not. That is the Day of Atonement. We are to do no work, none whatsoever, under any circumstances, because God said that for all time, for all generations, we are to not do any work. Okay, what about sacrificing? Doesn't count anymore. Festival of the Tabernacle. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the 15th day of the seventh month. So notice a lot going on in the seventh month, but on the 15th day of the seventh month, the Lord's Festival of Tabernacles begins, and it lasts for 7 days. And the first day is the sacred assembly, and do no regular work. For 7 days, present food offerings to the Lord, and on the 8th day, hold a sacred assembly and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a closing special assembly, do no regular work. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies for bringing food offerings to the Lord, the burnt offerings and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings required each day. These offerings are in addition to those for the Lord's Sabbaths, and in addition to your gifts and whatever you have vowed, and all the free will offerings you give to the Lord. It seems painfully obvious here that the sacrificial system is meant to endure, and yet it hasn't, right? And now, don't get me wrong, as a Christian, I get why it hasn't. But at the same time, if I were a Jew, a non-believer, if you will, but a person who believed in Yahweh God, but not a person who believes in Christ, this is a major problem. Because if God says over and over through this passage and others in this book, how these are things that you are to do for all time, and the Jews basically pick and choose which ones that they think God was serious about. Da, 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 da. These, I already read that. So, beginning with the 15th day on the seventh month, after you've gathered the crops of the land, celebrate the festival to the Lord for 7 days. The first day is a day of Sabbath rest, and the eighth day is also a day of Sabbath rest. On the first day, you are to take branches from luxuriant trees, from palms, willows, and other leafy trees, and rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. 7 days. Celebrate this as a festival to the Lord for 7 days each year. This will be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Celebrate in the seventh month. Live in these temporary shelters for 7 days. This is the festival of tents. You may have seen this in the Chosen, where a certain time of the year, all the Jews are supposed to basically no longer live in, like, if you live in a nice house like this one, for those 7 days, you're supposed to pitch up a tent in your and live in that instead of your home. And so, even if it's just in your backyard, you're supposed to spend a week in a tent every year. Funny, I don't see that happening either. And by the way, staying at the Hilton doesn't count. Anyway, all native-born Israelites are to live in such shelters, so your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So anyone who is descended from Israel, and so I suppose this one wouldn't apply to converts to Judaism, and are required to live in temporary shelters for a week every year. I just don't see that happening. That's the thing. A lot of these things, modern Jews are all about. They'll go to synagogue. They'll insist that they don't do any work, and they certainly will celebrate these days. But they leave out all the sacrificial stuff, which means that we're just going to do the stuff that feels good to us. That's kind of messed up. We're talking about God here. So Moses announced to the Israelites the appointed festivals of the Lord. And there you go. I mean, so we have these various festivals that are called to be endure for all time, and they just haven't. All right, so with that, I'm going to do a little bit of the chat before I wrap things up here for our first morning live stream. Thank you for all of you that have joined. So let's see. Let's see, I already read that. Josiah says apparently the Orthodox Church is really big in Tennessee. Must have a lot of Eastern Europeans. We do. We have. I know we have a lot of Coptic Christians, and yeah. So I I think that it's mostly like we get people that are from the Middle East. And they're very, I was talking to them about it. They're very big on the idea that their church was founded directly by Mark, if I remember correctly. Because the Orthodox church I go to is a lot of Eastern Europeans. My dad works 7 days a week. And you know what? Lately, I've been working 7 days a week. It's not the ideal thing. Now, as a Christian, I don't think that it's a violation of God's commandment, but I do think that that commandment is there for a reason. I think that man was meant to work, but I also think he was meant to rest. And so I think that ideally you should rest one day in seven. Is that always possible? No. And do I think somebody, contrary to what the Pharisees and stuff would believe, I don't think that it is a sin if you are forced to work 7 days a week by your circumstance. I think that God has a certain level of understanding to that. Robert says, as a Messianic believer, yes, the Sabbath is Saturday. I keep it as best as I can. Well, yeah, and that's, look, I think that people try to debate over the Sabbath being Saturday or Sunday. That's not even, I don't even understand that debate because I don't think there's any real argument to be made that it's anything other than Saturday. The only reason that most Christian churches tend to worship on Sunday is that's what's called the day of the Lord, or the day that it's the day of the week that Jesus rose. Notice, Jesus, in a very real sense, honored the Sabbath even in death because he didn't rise until after the Sabbath was complete. And in fact, immediately, if you depending on how you understand the resurrection story, it seems that immediately upon the end of the Sabbath, then that is when Jesus rose. Would be sunrise on Sunday. So that's when Christians tend to celebrate because we're celebrating the resurrection of Christ. I have no problem with that. However, if you were a Jew who was an early Christian, that meant that you would go to temple on Saturday because that's what you did. It was the Sabbath, and you would spend you would go to temple. However, on Sunday you would celebrate the resurrection every week. Now, it also meant you probably had to do that before work, because that's just the way this, or after work. And when we get to things like Acts, we'll see some of that. There's no Messianic congregation close to where I live, so I watch a couple on YouTube. Well, Robert, I don't know how you feel about it. I know that I don't have a problem with Messianic Christians per se, but I hope that you attend some kind of church because it is absolutely, I mean, if you read through the New Testament, you are instructed to attend. And so if there's no if you prefer a Messianic church, I certainly understand that, but if there's no Messianic church available, then you should be going somewhere else. And it doesn't matter. To me, I don't really care that I'm not a fan of denominations, so I don't care if it's a Methodist or a Baptist or a Catholic or an Orthodox or whatever. Just find a church that, as best you can tell, is not contradicting the Bible in any way, and who's then the congregation or a group of people that you're willing to both hold accountable and be held accountable by. Because that's kind of the purpose of it, and it's to strengthen you and also to have some accountability there. Someone with a giant lollipop versus someone with a toilet. I don't even know how that fight works. I mean, the person with the toilet will at least have a place to relieve themselves. So, yeah, but using a toilet as a weapon would be rather difficult. So I would probably have to go with the lollipop, especially after having seen The Naked Gun, in which you can see a lollipop used as a deadly weapon. You can put yourself as an AI character. Yeah, I suppose you can. For $1 million, young Michael should have a bulldozer and tractor fight with Mr. Know-It-All. Michael drives the bulldozer, Mr. Know-It-All drives the tractor. Okay. Well, for $1 million, I would do it as old Michael. The Good Book in the Morning. Yes, good to see you. What if it's a camping vacation? I don't think that's the point. But I would assume that, it's kind of an interesting question. Like if you're a Jew and you decide to go backpacking in the woods for those 7 days, I would say that's probably perfectly fine as long as you are meditating on the idea of why you're living in a temporary shelter those 7 days. Does it count if you're camping in a nice lake in a national park and swimming or windsurfing every day? Well, it doesn't say that you have to do nothing fun during those 7 days, only that you are residing in a temporary shelter. So, as far as the command of God, I would say there's no problem there. But I would also be careful about just turning it into an excuse to go on vacation. Who decided which of these things to keep recognizing? The Jewish Council of Rabbinic tradition. Remember, after the destruction of the temple, the Pharisees kind of went by the wayside, and it became a time of rabbis. And the rabbinic tradition, the rabbis are the ones that kind of decided that, well, we're not going to worry about sacrifices anymore and stuff like that, which I think is a mistake. We have Easter, Lent, etc. Yes, but unlike what we were just reading, Easter, Lent, Christmas, all that stuff, none of that is commanded, right? There is no commanded Christian holy day. And the closest that you come is honestly the Lord's Supper. Jesus says to do this in remembrance of me, but he doesn't say to take a day, a specific day to do it. And it would seem, based on the context of that passage, that Jesus basically means that whenever you are eating and drinking, that you give thanks and that you remember the blood and body of Christ. However, we've turned it into have some grape juice and a wafer at church. And of course, the Catholics even go so far, and I know there are other denominations that do this as well, but to believe in transubstantiation, where they believe that the juice and wafer literally become the body and blood of Christ as you eat them. Why? I don't know. Why they want to kind of push the idea that it is literal cannibalism makes no sense to me. Never even heard of the 10th thing. Yeah, a lot of people haven't because it hasn't been practiced in any significant way in quite some time. What do you think about this new trend from Gen Z adult pacifiers? I think it's stupid. I'll just say it, it's stupid. If you're a grown up and you did a binky, you're not a grown up. Also, apparently by law, what Trump had done in Venezuela was legal. Strange how that works. If any of us kidnapped anyone, we'd have the FBI after us. I'd like to know what law you're referring to, because as far as I know, what he did was a violation of international law. So just because we have a grievance with the guy doesn't mean we have the right to kidnap him. But that's a whole other thing. So I honestly, Robert, if you know what law specifically you're talking about, I would love to know it, because I want to be staying. I'd rather be correct than right. So, well, I guess that doesn't make much sense, but you know what I'm saying. I would rather be corrected so that I can be right, than to just think that I'm right and be wrong. So if you know the law that you're talking about, please tell me so that I can verify it. Cotton Hill versus Mike Tyson. That one I would probably have to give to Mike Tyson, assuming we're talking Mike Tyson in his prime. While Cotton Hill is a tough little son of a gun, Mike Tyson is Iron Mike. It was also the day that almost everyone, at least in North America, had off. Because they had no shopping Sundays because of church. Well, yeah, for a long time in North America, Sundays, the stores were closed, the banks were closed, everything was closed, because, yeah, most people were going to church. And I hate the way that YouTube changed the names, because I know that's not what you went by, but I can't remember what your regular name is. But let's see, mess, however you say that, person with a rabbit mask says, "Good midday." Well, it's still morning for me. Palm Sunday. Well, Palm Sunday is loosely based on that, and so the reason they did that was they were honoring Christ in the same way, and this is one of those things that the Jewish leadership thought was blasphemy. They were treating Christ like he was God. Catholics do the ashes, they do, but again, there's no commandment for Ash Wednesday or any of the funky stuff that the Catholics do. But I think that's also that's during the Lent season. I'm saying hi to Street Preacher. Let's see. This Christmas service, I found our church now uses prepackaged communion packs. We've been using those for a little while. They're more sanitary, and you know what? If your church does communion, we do communion every week. I don't have a problem with that. I think that it's a healthy tradition. I just don't think that that's what Jesus really meant. You know, Orthodox uses real bread. Yeah, but using an actual, I mean, if you were to do it the way it's described in the Bible, where you take a loaf of bread, you literally break it, and everybody takes a piece off of that loaf, and everybody sips from the same goblet, because if you're going to follow what they say in the Bible, everybody should be drinking from the same cup, right? That's a little unsanitary. So, yeah. They used to have shots of wine, grape juice, and bread squares. Let's see. In the Orthodox Church, saints are part of saints are part of Christ. That I don't even understand what that means. Are you saying? I mean, what do you mean a saint is a part of Christ? So does that mean that if you say a prayer to, you can pray to Saint Peter because Peter is partly Jesus? I don't quite understand that. Now it's cup sealed with plastic. You open it and there's stale wafer on top and a sip of terrible juice on the cup over. Yes, but that stale wafer and terrible juice is at least sanitary. With what Trump is planning, I wonder if the draft will be brought back, though. I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting to see if Trump actually intends to follow through with his latest bravado about taking up the whole Greenland thing seriously. I hope not. I really hope he's not trying to literally go to war with all of our allies. But whatever, it's Trump. I guess it's cheaper or less work. Well, it's more sanitary. Risen bread or unrisen bread, the host with the most. If you're talking about the Last Supper, trying to replicate it, it would be unrisen, it would be unleavened bread, no yeast, because they, remember, it was a Passover meal that Jesus did this at. Hannibal Lecter versus Leatherface. Well, in a straight up fight, I'd have to give it to Leatherface. He has a chainsaw. However, as far as cleverness, I would give it to Hannibal Lecter. There's a YouTuber that did a video all about it. Doctor something or other is the channel. Is the channel literally Doctor something, or Doctor something another, or is it you just some doctor and you don't remember the name? New prepackaged wafers seem unleavened, but they used to just do regular white bread. Yeah, well, the thing is, like these prepackaged wafers, I don't know that you could even qualify them as bread. I think that they're just some kind of bread-like product. Let's see. I tell you, things do change. That is true. But if there is something that is specifically commanded by God to do this for all time, I don't think you should change it up. Our church has communion once a month and on Christmas and Easter. That's fairly typical. When I went to the Methodist church, that's what they did. Like I said, our church does it every week. Catholic churches do it every week. It just it varies. Uh, Keep in mind, Jesus just said, "Do this in remembrance of me." He didn't say do it once a week. He didn't say do it once a month. He didn't even say do it once a year. And so some people take it as Jesus was literally talking about having a Passover Seder and then finishing the Passover Seder with the bread and the cup. Other people take that as to mean that every time you worship, you should take a moment to drink wine and eat bread, because and this honestly, I think that this goes back to more of the problems that we have with these translations and stuff. Breaking bread doesn't mean literally cracking a loaf of bread and passing it around, right? What it means is having a meal with someone. And that's not something that we do. And I know it's not practical for most churches because it's not like you can just prepare a meal for, like with our church for, 10,000 people every week. I get that. It's not practical to do that. But Jesus didn't make a specific commandment like that. I think where we as Christians are kind of missing it, I think that it's really meant to be a part of your regular eating practices. Nobody in the Orthodox Church, for what I see, don't get sick. Not saying they do get sick. I'm not, look, I'm just saying that sharing a single loaf of bread among a community of people, if one of those people is sick, they can contaminate the bread, and so the other people might get sick from it. Especially when you're talking about with the wine, when everybody drinks from the same goblet. If the first person that sips on that goblet has some kind of weird, funky disease that could get a little bit in the wine, and then the next thing you know, everybody's sick. Now, the good thing is that wine, because it has alcohol tends to kill most germs, and so it it's kind of a self sanitizing solution. But at the same time, do you really want to take that chance? I prefer the bread like and wine like product self sealed. Very American, bread like product and wine like product. That is very American, isn't it? My guess was sawdust. Oh, as far as that, yeah, I don't know what those wafers are made of, but they're terrible. Dr. Todd Grand is the channel name. I found it in my watch history just now. There you go. So, I'm going to write that down so I'll check it out. Dr. Todd, there we go. Todd Grand. All right, I'll check. Grande, so to say. Ash Williams versus Freddy Krueger. Well, Freddy Krueger would definitely win that. I mean, look, Ash is groovy and all, but he doesn't have dream powers or anything. There's a female mortician that has a YouTube channel that did a video about a one and only supposedly death picture of Epstein from her years of experience. He's not dead in the picture. I don't know anything about that, but I would say this: release the files. The longer he takes, as far as delaying and denying on the Epstein front, it's obvious that if and when we ever get the files released, what we will get will be mostly fiction. There are two different Orthodox churches, Oriental and Eastern. Actually, there's more than two. But I mean, if you want to, let's see. Okay, so should see where they are. Let's see. Come on, give me a list. What is it? Here we go. Eastern Orthodox. Let's see, which is a communion of self-governing churches like Russian, Greek, and Siberian. The Oriental Orthodox Okay, so basically, the Eastern and Oriental Orthodox churches are like the two main groups, and each one has subgroups under it. So, under the Eastern Orthodox Church, you have like the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, etc. Under the Oriental Orthodox, you have the Coptic Christians, like what we have a lot of here. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which actually is kind of funny because the Ethiopians have some things that are different than other Christians, and so I think that the Orthodox churches, there are two primary groups and then a smidgen of subgroups under each one, which is fine, but I'm not Orthodox, so I don't care. I would eat those wafers by the box full. Well, Gorilla, you are a weird guy. Ask a Mortician is her channel name. Okay, well, I'll see if I can find that, but I will be honest with you. I'm not so much concerned about, ooh, is this picture actually a dead Epstein or not? I want the Epstein files released, unredacted. And the longer that they delay, the more suspicious I become. So I don't like the fact that they're hiding. And no, Ask a Mortician is not the channel. Caitlin Doherty is the channel. She just has a series called Ask a Mortician. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know where. Let's see. Civil War, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't see anything specifically about the Epstein photo, but, you know, whatever. All right, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up because I got to go in just a little bit. It was fun doing my first morning live stream. Hopefully, I will be better prepared for the next one, which, if all goes well, will be Friday morning. So I will talk to you guys then, and until then, shalom, shalom.